In case you have any Zoom problems, please type Echo IT in the chat room and you'll receive assistance. We kindly request you to rename yourself by providing your name and your organization. Please try to use the chat function as well as you can by sticking to questions and comments related to the activity that has brought us together. If your bandwidth allows, you can keep your video on and ensure that your microphone is muted at all times unless you have been given permission to speak. See, will not move. Okay, just excuse me. For some reason, my screen isn't moving. Sorry about that. So we have, sorry about that. Seems like I have network issues. My slides won't show. Okay, so we have interpretation services. We have some interpreters in the house. Please use the globe icon for you to change to French or English. Our agenda is right before us. We shall have Dr. Aristide Dionkonda, who is the Regional Manager Technical for AFROHUN, to welcome us, provide us with the background of the project and the objectives for the orientation and training series. We have 4 series, and this is our first. Then we shall have our facilitator, Professor Robinson Medegela from Sokoine University, to take us through our orientation. He will then hand over at the end of his session to Dr. Fatimata Nyang from Senegal, and she'll take us through question and answer session and wrap up. So may I invite Dr. Dionkonda to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie.
Let me unshare. Yeah.
Thank you, Winnie. Good morning, good evening to all of you, dear guests. Let's introduce myself. I am Dr. Aristide Dionkonda, Regional Manager Technical for the AFROHUN Secretariat, but I'm based in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan. And on behalf of Professor Bazeo, CEO of AFROHUN, Dr. Irene, Regional Program Manager, and the whole Secretariat team, I would like to start by saying thank you to all of you and welcome again to the AFROHUN Transition Award Multidisciplinary Action Research, Essential Foundation Skills Orientation and Training Workshop. As you know, the goal of AFROHUN Transition Award as part of the Global Health Security Agenda partner is to develop, to strengthen a local One Health workforce with the capacity to prepare, prevent, detect, and respond to public health events. And so in relation to this goal, the project has 3 major outputs, of which output 2 strategy, which is to support professional development and research opportunities in zoonotic disease among students and faculty through fellowships, internships, and small grants with 2 major components. The first component is design and deliver a competitive faculty and student research small grants program for priority zoonotic disease in Africa. And the second one is to develop and execute the AFROHUN internship program for priority zoonotic disease in Africa. And within the framework of our orientation workshop, we have 3 major objectives. Objective 1 is to orient participants of the USAID-funded AFROHUN Transition Awards and on the multidisciplinary action research program on zoonotic disease. Objective 2, orient participants on the policy framework on the One Health and zoonotic disease. And finally, objective 3 is to retool participants on essential foundational skills for conducting multidisciplinary One Health action research and on zoonotic disease. So to not be too long, I would like to wish you an excellent workshop, and please do not hesitate to ask questions. Thank you very much, and over to you, Winnie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dionkunda. I'd now like to invite Professor Robinson Modegela to start by introducing himself and then moving on to the training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Secretariat, for giving me this opportunity to orient and provide an oversight on what is expected in the Transitional Award in terms of research. My role now is to introduce myself. I'm Professor Robinson Modegela, working with the Sokoine University of Agriculture based in Morogoro, Tanzania. I'm a veterinarian by profession, and I've been working with AFROHUN for a number of years since its genesis. By then it was OSHEA in 2011. And since then I've been part of OSHEA and witnessed the transition from OSHEA to AFROHUN. And for the time being, as you may be knowing, that AFROHUN, in terms of sustainability and the scalability, in terms of scale, is now going Africa and is working hard to establish the AFROHUN Academy based in Uganda. And within the academy, we have 5 pillars. And one of the pillars is research. I'm the chair of the research pillar in AFROHUN Academy. So I feel privileged to have this opportunity to deliver my lecture in a participatory way, which I believe would serve 2 purposes. 1, orient yourself and update you on what is expected to work as a researcher in the AFROHUN family. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And let me ask if you hear me well, because maybe of technology, you might be getting challenges in getting me well when I present. Am I loud enough and are you comfortable?
Yes, you're loud.
Yes.
You're loud enough.
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy again to have my mentors here, and one of them is Professor Kileo. So I'm seeing Professor Kileo with us. He's the country manager for AFROHUN in Tanzania. And by virtue of age, he did not apply to be born before me. So he was born before me, and he ended up being my very close brother and a parent in nurturing me in One Health and towards research in AFROHUN. So Professor Kileo, if you won't mind just to say hi, because you are very special. And today I'm not teaching you, I'm sure you are there mentoring me and seeing if I'm delivering the right material. So could you say hi to the members, please? Professor Kileo.
Hi, thank you very much, Professor Modegela, for the compliments. And you're welcome to this AFROHUN fraternity and I wish you good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now allow me to share the slides that are prepared for today. I've shared my screen. Are you comfortable with my screen, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I'm having an opportunity now. Yes, thank you very much. So for those who are not speaking, if you could mute your microphone, it would make your life much, much easier. So the task that I have been assigned is to be part in AFROHUN Transition Award, and specifically work on the capacity building on foundation. Could you please mute your microphone? Yes, thank you. So my work here is about capacity building on foundation skills for One Health action research. And basically, is a foundation skill. Our understanding is that most of you have gone through training in higher learning institutions. And if at all is through universities, there was a stage where you had to do research. And basically you got the skills while doing your special project. I believe you completed your bachelor and you went further, some of you to master's programs. And basically you wouldn't have graduated without carrying out research leading to a dissertation. I believe, and basically you wouldn't get your PhD without carrying out research. And in every stage that you went through, you had to undergo some training in research skills. So it was very difficult indeed to plan on what we should present. And what we agreed, we thought it would be worthy to read what we normally find in most of the calls for proposals. And at the same time, we are expecting to carry out a research, but before that, we'll have to apply for a research grant. We have a lot of issues in common. So what I'm going to present is like a reminder what you should prepare before you can go and apply for the grant under AFROHUN. Specifically, expecting for you to get a brief background of the project, which has already been presented. My role will be to present the objectives of the training and the orientation. Then One Health research overview. In terms of AFROHUN, we have a philosophy of One Health research. We have One Health core competencies that will enable us to carry out the relevant research, and will give you an overview on why action research is important for AFROHUN, why it matters, and the elements of the action research. So we are transiting from the conventional research to action research. It will be a long day. I'll touch base on elements of the project planning in overview, then elements of action research. And for today, we'll end up touching base on research methods, specifically what we would consider as applicant, as reviewers on the study area, study designs. And basically, I'll touch base on the structures for the study designs. In most cases, the POT, the POT and the PCOT, and finally, I'll end up with the overview of the study design at a large scale. So the objective of this session, ladies and gentlemen, is to create the space for interactive learning on skills critical for the faculty and the students to implement all elements of action research on zoonotic diseases using One Health approach. Number two, to strengthen the multidisciplinary teams with the culture and the norms for leading change in the implementation of action research on zoonotic disease using One Health approach. And thirdly, the objective is to provide induction support to the teams. We know you are going to apply, so we wish to provide some support. So induction support to the team at the head start to enable cohesions of teams and a smooth takeoff and implementation of action research on zoonotic diseases using One Health approach. As you have heard from Professor Aristide, the Transition Award basically aims at strengthening the capacities of university faculty and the students to conduct One Health action-oriented research that provides solutions to complex health challenges. We are not going to read about the call for proposals. AFROHUN will not provide funds just to allow faculty and the students to carry out normal research. You should underline, as you see in red, their interest is action-oriented research. And specifically using One Health approach, but as you may know that we have eco-health approach, and the difference in terms of approach between One Health and eco-health does not differ. We are going to use One Health approach, and I always find important to define it so that we sail on the same boat. In our case, as you see the figures on the left side of this slide, we are referring One Health as an integrated, unifying approach to balance and optimize the health of people or humans, animals, and the environment. This approach mobilizes the multiple sectors, disciplines, and the communities at varying levels of society to work together. In so doing, when we say different levels, we are referring different scales at a global scale, regional scale, and you may go down to national scale and the subnational scales. And we believe through this approach, new and better ideas are developed that address root causes and create sustainable solutions. So One Health is not new. As per AFROHUN, this is how we have been defining One Health, and we take the biosphere, the ecosystem into account. As you may find here, we have human element, we have animal element, and we have, for example, food security. You talk for human beings, but referring from the animal part. Then you have the environment. Down here, you have humans, you have companion animals, wild animals, fish, plants, and so forth. We have shared medicines, ladies and gentlemen. And in terms of food systems, you see a very good interactions between the three elements: human, animals, and the environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, why it matters for OSHEA to plan and say we should use One Health or eco-health approach? Certainly, AFROHUN was able to get resources that eventually will serve as a source of resource to you projects from the relevance viewpoint. And basically, where do you belong? I've decided to profile the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, we have 17 goals. And if you map it, profile it from the ecosystem health approach, from One Health approach, which you should understand from the word go before you put up the grant. Basically, our interest now is at a second profile at the society level. Below it, we have the biosphere, and this is the first level in the profile. After the society, ladies and gentlemen, you have the third level, which is economy. And after that, you see now the 17th Sustainable Development Goal is about partnership. So the second level at a society, we are addressing human health, animal health. Why? Our focus is on poverty. So if you go through the Sustainable Development Goal number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 11, and 16, it speaks about poverty, hunger, health, education, gender, energy, sustainable cities, peace, and justice. So this is the second level. In reality, the way the call will appear, it will be trying to expand the horizontal integration. We cannot manage to achieve without going down through vertical integration, touching base on the biosphere. And the biosphere, ladies and gentlemen, is all about land, it's all about water. And the way the Sustainable Development Goals were coined, you could find the goal talking about hygiene, sanitation, wash programs regarding water and land. And number 13 talks about the global changes through climate change. In other words, we will never address successfully health challenges, hunger-related challenges without basing on what you find through vertical integration at the base, and that is the biosphere. That's why we are taking time now to give you an overview saying you'll be applying your proposal. The reviewers will be reading your proposal, trying to articulate the horizontal, articulate the relationship, the interactions at the horizontal level, but at the same time trying to integrate in a vertical approach, whereby we'll be looking at what you have at the biosphere. So above the society, ladies and gentlemen, we have the economy. In the economy now, if you read about Sustainable Development Goal, it talks about decent work, industries and innovations, inequalities, and the sustainable consumptions, and that is Sustainable Development Goal number 8, 9, 10, and 12. Beyond that, it speaks about partnership above all. And the partnership, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are now doing through networks. So the partnership could be at a global scale, regional scale like AFROHUN. We could have partnership at a national level and a sub-national level at village level. We can have partnerships between institutions. So ladies and gentlemen, the transitional award takes into account all elements that you find in Sustainable Development Goals. You may end up choosing few. We are led by health, but we should not forget the biosphere, economy, and the background on partnership. Why it matters, ladies and gentlemen? We are talking about action research. I'm sorry, I'm using the example for antimicrobial resistance right now here. There have been some maps in terms of publications, ladies and gentlemen. If you go through, for example, this was just through PubMed search engine, a research between 1960 to 2017. This is the number of publications that you find regarding antimicrobial resistance. If you go deeper, 95% of these publications are about identification and the characterization of antimicrobial problems. Less than 5% speaks about solutions to antimicrobial resistance. That's why we're having the transitional award talking about action research. We want to orient people to move from focusing on problem identification and characterization. We should move towards solutions. And that is what farmers want. That is what our fellows in villages, in urban areas want to hear and to see in operation. So to be able, ladies and gentlemen, to do that, AFROHUN, by then it was OSHARE, we came up with the core competences, and basically it was about the knowledge, behavior, and attitudes needed by every member in a self-initiated and organized team to carry out action research on zoonotic diseases. And specifically, we have a number of them, more than 16. However, I selected a few which we must understand. And basically, you should, back in your background, have the system thinking approach, leadership, communication, culture, beliefs, and agenda, values and ethics, without forgetting collaboration and partnership. So this has to be part of your thinking before and during application of the project. So what are the general elements? What are the general elements? What are the general elements when you are planning and you want to carry out research? So ladies and gentlemen, the way you started when you were at school, be it during your undergraduate, master's or PhD, and eventually when you are now writing research proposals, trying to get a grant, like the one that you are going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we normally start by working on the constraint, problem that you want to solve. So what kind of problem are we having that would wish to solve? Ladies and gentlemen, could it be rabies? Could it be anthrax? Could it be COVID-19? To be able to align our thinking and the thinking of the administrator of the grant, as well as the thinking of the development partner, the donor that gave us the resource, we must come up with objectives. And from the objectives, we should formulate the specific objectives, stroke the tasks, and eventually we should come up with the expected outcome, and try to figure out what would be the contribution to the impact. So ladies and gentlemen, the logical flow is important. And normally we have a linear progression, which is very critical. But I have never seen a project proposal which does not speak about need, the constraint. And eventually you end up writing the so-called problem statement. After that, you should align it with the objective, and they should come up with the specific objectives, which eventually you should translate or transform them into tasks, and eventually should give you the output, outcome, and the way they will contribute to impact. So this is the foundation, 4 elements which must be in place. I don't know what is not happening.
I can hear you. Can you hear you?
Yes, but my slides.
We're on the result chain.
Yes, there is. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, great.
Backward most. Okay.
Yeah, so the result chain, ladies and gentlemen, basically, we are going to come up with a problem, and the problem will take us to the objectives, and from the objectives, we'll go to the results. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be planning, okay, and eventually we'll have results at output, outcome, and a contribution to the impact. The 2 elements here, which will generate from the tasks, you remember I said from the objective, you will have the tasks coming from the specific objectives. And basically you'll have activities. And this is part of the intervention, because from the activities, you'll be asked to come up with a suggestion on what you think will be the input in your project. So this is the result chain which is expected out of the 4 elements that I mentioned. And to go further, ladies and gentlemen, you can present it in a different perspective, where you have inputs which will be generated from the activities, and the activities will be generated from the objectives. The objective will give you the output. So the output eventually will come from objectives, and eventually you'll end up with the outcome. We'll discuss it later on what are the outcomes. And eventually we'll have to assess your project, how it contributes to the impact. In the proposal, the way AFROHUN has framed whatever they are going to announce, you'll be answering the question on how, what do we want, and why. So the how will be answered by inputs and activities. What we want to do will be defined by the objectives, eventually be translated to the outputs, and basically we'll have outcomes. And why? Basically, we are having rabies as a challenge. We are having maybe COVID-19 as a challenge. You'll be contributing to the impact. You are not going to generate the impact. You'll be reading the development strategies, maybe from the African perspective, from the East African region perspectives, and so forth. And ladies and gentlemen, input and activities will give you, is part of the resources. And the output, outcome, and the impact is part of the results. During the planning, ladies and gentlemen, we normally start from the impact viewpoint. When you say now, I want to come with a proposal for AFROHUN Transition Award, you should read and convince yourself that at the impact level, we want to eliminate or minimize the rabies challenge and move from score 4 to score 2. No, from score 2 to score number 4. We are talking about the impact at a larger scale. We'll present, I'll come back to you later on. And from the impact, basically, you'll have outcome, expected outcome. But indeed, you are starting point to work hard from the problem identified, coming from the problem statement, and basically you will go on working until when you reach to a point of coming up with activities and eventually input. You can see, ladies and gentlemen, how the arrow starts a bit lighter and it becomes darker, meaning that you start working as we are doing today, but as we move, keep on writing, it becomes so intense, and you see actually the color changing from a bit lighter to more darker, meaning the planning stage, you don't start from the input, from the budget. So that is the challenge of some researchers, especially young generation. I was young as well by then. People would say, okay, how much money is there? Instead of trying to define like what a challenge, what do you have that you want to solve? What kind of constraint problems? People would start thinking about money. Money is not the starting point to think about a research, actual research. Going further, once you have done your planning and you have signed the contract, when it comes to the time of implementing your research, what we wanted to see in the matrix, we want to see your thinking philosophically moving from the input. I'm having a budget now, $50,000 US, to be able to implement 20 activities, which will lead into output. Basically, you started struggling, and you see again the color of the arrow changing. During the implementation, you start from the activities. And while implementing activities, you generate output. and eventually come up with the outcome which will contribute to the impact. If your project is for 2 years, we are going to see the impact after 2 years, but we have to see you showing sign that you wanted to work hard at the input level immediately after signing of the contract. So this matrix matters, and this matrix is what is expected in the transitional award. Yes, using One Health approach, and we wish you to plan using One Health, Equal Health principles, and it will guide you on how to go step by step, making sure that you start with the constraint analysis. From the constraint, you go to the objectives, which will take you to the task, and from the task, you end up with the result, and the result is at the level of output, outcome, and the impact, which basically we don't expect you to generate impact. You will contribute to, so we see your contribution to a bigger scale or higher level at the impact level. So, ladies and gentlemen, once you have heard about the way AFROHUN and in the transitional award, we wish to plan and move with our research, I want to take you now to the project cycle. This is the traditional way, the way we have been planning our projects. So in a traditional way, for planning research, writing the proposal, we want to see this picture. We want you to show us the plan. And basically the plan is the proposal. And once you have a proposal, a plan which will undergo some machinery towards implementation. Because once you have resources, what follows is implementation. You have implementation, you will generate data. You have to organize the data. Once you have organized the data, we expect you to analyze the data. And after analysis, you come up with a report. You may come up with a publication. You may come up with a poster. You may come to present in a conference. You may come up with a number of ways. You could be informing the communities. You just come up with a piece of information in a newspaper and so forth. It is at this stage. Normally, in a conventional research, the project cycle, you plan, you implement, you organize, you analyze, then you report and you go back again to planning. This is a very conventional way. Where it solves the problems of communities or not, it doesn't matter. This is how we do research in most cases. The world is changing. Remember, I showed you one of the slides that taking an example of zoonotic diseases, an example of emerging and re-emerging diseases. If you go through what has been published, ladies and gentlemen, what you find is that over 95% of what is published is basically on identification and the characterizations of problems. Very few, if any, you will find less than. So the world has changed. It's time to change. Today now we are moving towards the conventional research into action research. And the transition award, you remember I showed you in red saying transition award through AFROHUN will fund One Health action research. And what it means research about the strategies which will tackle the real world problems in participatory, collaborative, and cyclical ways in order to produce both knowledge and solutions, actionable solutions. So this is what we are going to see. A research, and we have elements of action research, and the purpose here is to solve the real problems. What we face is not a question of just generating knowledge. Yes, you generate knowledge, but beyond the knowledge we generate, we must have actionable solutions. So action research, ladies and gentlemen, is goal-oriented towards change rather than just knowledge generation. So in the past, we were happy generating knowledge, but in reality, AFROHUN is happy when see you generating knowledge, but that is secondary indeed. The primary thing is the fund is there to help us solve zoonotic challenges. So action research leads to creation of practical solutions to constraints or the problems that have been identified or what you worked through. You will hear about intervention, implementation, research continuum. What it means, basically, you are going to work on something where there is evidence that it works in a controlled environment. So your research will be at a level 2, proof of implementation. And the question is, does the intervention work in real settings? We don't expect you to say, okay, we have rabies, I'm going to write a proposal to produce a vaccine. That is not the interest of this grant. We know there is a vaccine which is available and it can work. Why is it not working? Some people are saying we have challenges in a real setting. We have a challenge of cold chain. Okay, so how can we solve that so that it can work in a real setting? You have anthrax. Basically, if you want now to say you want to come up with a diagnostic, whatever, for anthrax, fine, you want to carry out epidemiology of anthrax, it's academic. But in reality, even getting money for epidemiological studies of anthrax today is very difficult. Donors will say, we already know the solution. So give us a research question, come up with a proposal on how you can solve anthrax. We know something exists. If it's a vaccination for anthrax, yes, it's available. So why is it not working? So our level, ladies and gentlemen, and I could see the funding we have is not much. For you going to a higher level of trying to work at a scale up could be difficult. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, the focus will be at a level 2. So these are the elements of the action research. You remember the traditional research, we talked about planning, implementation. Then we said you should we should clean up your data, we should organize your data, you analyze the data. Then we said you use the data that has been analyzed, and you can publish or you can communicate it. Then it goes back to planning again. Action research, ladies and gentlemen, the cycle, conventional research for action research that AFROHUN expect is the same, is the plan. So we will start with the plan. Then from the planning, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to implement, basically act. And after acting, what you expect you now, they say observe. Basically, you are combining now, after you have acted, you have generated information, you have the data. So we expect you, really, if at all is a question of organizing, you organize your data, you analyze your data, and you sit and they try to reflect if at all it has given you the answer that you wanted to have or not. So this is the cycle expected in the transitional award that AFROHUN is going to manage. So the cycle repeats. You reflect and you can say, yes, I've achieved by 20%. I need to add another layer. So you go to planning again. You plan, then you act. Of course, after you have acted, you organize your data. That means observation. Then come up with the analysis, do the presentation, so forth, before you can reflect for application. The details are found on the left-hand side when you are having planning, and basically It's about identifying problems, trying to see what you are going to answer. Then by acting, basically you implement it, collecting the data and observing. Basically you are analyzing whatever you have, and eventually you are evaluating. And what you do, it goes back to planning. Through this action research, normally you come up with some answers, and those answers are the ones that you will end up saying in the result chain. What are the output? Output, fine, comes from the conventional research or whatever you are doing here. But basically, AFROHUN will be very much interested to see your result at an outcome level, a change. So we will present to you in a subsequent lecture what kind of action and a change you expect to see at, not at the output level, at the outcome level. So outcome level is what is really measured in action research, because our interest is towards change. It's not a question of saying, I worked in the village and I found the prevalence of rabies was 20%. That is fine. So what? We want for you to use 20%, maybe as a data in the baseline. And towards intervention, we want you to tell us, I've seen through my research a decline in rabies, change, decreased the magnitude of rabies, decreased the mortalities in humans, decreased the loss of animals from maybe 20 to 15%. That is the outcome, the result level, which is expected under AFROHUN One Health Action Research. So we are talking about One Health research using One Health approach. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been a lot of confusion. Working together, it doesn't mean taking responsibilities and working for other professions. In One Health, we work together. So we have human health, we have animal health, you have wildlife experts, and so forth. If you are going to address, for example, anthrax, there is a component of anthrax for human health experts. They should address it. And there is an animal element in anthrax. Animal health experts must address it. And if you participate with the wildlife authorities, you should bring them on board. And then later on, we'll touch base on stakeholders mapping, stakeholders analysis. That will be lecture number 2. But in reality, this has been a mistake over the years. Mind you, we are going to be trained, reorient ourselves on ethical issues, which is very critical. So basically, from the animal health aspects, we have the review board, and we know in the first place, if you are a vet, you must take an oath and you really work as a vet. Human health, the same. So we see One Health in action research, ladies and gentlemen, during planning. So during planning, we are going to assess and see how you have integrated One Health, and basically using the landscape that I showed you at a horizontal integration when you are talking about human health, animal health, wildlife health, environmental health relationship. But we are going to see when you are planning how you integrate vertically with the biosphere and something above you. And therefore, we want to see you showing us how you will you will present your project to the planners. How you will present your work to decision makers. I want to see One Health is where you are going to integrate all those issues. When it comes to action, for example, if it's a question of collecting blood samples in women, we don't expect a vet to do that. It's not allowed, it's not your field, and you don't know how to do that. If it's a question of collecting samples in wildlife, okay, don't expect a human doctor to go there and start collecting samples in lions. He will be killed, by the way, because he's not trained to do that. So during activities, we want to see the division of labor, responsibilities. When we will be acting, we are using One Health approach, we planned it together, but immediately we should see who will do what and who will not do whatever. In the observation, we collect the data, you can interact, but again, you might find the collection of data going individually. At the time now, when you are analyzing the data, you sit it together now. You sit it together, analyze the data, and during the reporting, when you are writing, basically you work it together. And this can help you plan better, contain the disease. So ladies and gentlemen, One Health is seen clearly at the planning stage and at a reflection stage, plus or minus at observational stage, but very less, if any. You will find all responsible key stakeholders in One Health working together at the action level, because you have ethical issues that you must consider. So we must take this into account. We have some projects which do not really require that. All of us could play around into that. But basically, if you want to address anthrax, you want to address rabies, you want to address COVID-19, you'll see actually what I'm presenting making a lot of sense. In detail, during the plan is what you try to answer. What is the problem? Okay, choice making, with which resources, mechanisms, for whom, and so forth. You try to answer all those questions. And when you act now, basically you are based on what you planned, you are trying now to act. And eventually when you are observing, again, using the logic chain, this is where you find the result now. The result coming here. Now we said in action research, our interest is not at output level. Our interest is at outcome level, because we want to see change in the communities, change in the ecosystem, and so forth. I've already presented why it matters. Most of the research have been towards working on problems, characterizing the problems, but few publications, less than 5%, has been on solutions. So ladies and gentlemen, after you have planned and you have mobilized yourself, which will be a discussion at level 2, lecture number 2. But what we are trying to present here is like now, you think about the study sites. And in terms of study sites, study areas, what we consider, ladies and gentlemen, is the question of relevance. Is the area relevant? Then we consider efficiency. Efficiency, are you likely to come up with the anticipated outcome? So basically, at the efficiency, we are talking about getting the desired results. So you plan and you want to read your proposal, and we want to convince ourselves the site you have selected, because we are talking about working on rabies in wildlife, domestic human animal, domestic animal wildlife interface areas. Then the way you are telling us you want to carry out the study in a city, yes, you could have elements of wild animals, but one might say, I think the area is not really relevant. We are not going to get the results for anthrax by working in Dar es Salaam. But if you say you want to work in Ngorongoro Crater, you want to work in national parks and game reserves, that could make sense. Effectiveness, we try to gauge in terms of resources. We know geography, and basically you are doing a very good study, and we know you can work in a distance of about 100 kilometers and you get good results. But you are proposing for us that you want to travel and work about 2,000 kilometers. And is it really worth doing that? While we could get good results by this guy working in an area which is about 50 kilometers. So here we talk about cost. And you are talking about 5 researchers. In One Health, you want to see the effectiveness of that. You are 5 researchers and you are not really converted to work in One Health. And so eventually you find you going with 4 vehicles. Why 4 vehicles? Why you could use only 2 or 1? So we are going to assess the efficiency, effectiveness. It should be the right population. It should be sensitive to time, then resources, accessibility, political environment, because we know some areas you cannot easily access because of political instability. There could be some war challenges and so forth. What about the social? I have good examples. Had my students, and they went to a place to collect data where the government has ordered them to move. So it was not easy at all, and it was causing problem because they went there and they were chased. They were almost harmed, and we should consider social issues as well, without forgetting the legal issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, after you have considered a lot in terms of study design, study sites, which was the previous slide, and now we move to the last part of my presentation today on what you should consider. Basically, you should consider the study designs. And the study designs that we are thinking, remember, we want to see this in your proposal. What kind of design you are going to use based on the type of data you want to generate? Could it be descriptive information? Could it be qualitative data in particular? And basically you end up with the descriptive type of study designs. But if at all you want to have numbers, quantitative kind of results, then you should go for analytical study designs, which could be observational, and within it you have cross-sectional, case control, we have a cohort, and basically you can have experimental studies in lab and the field trials. With the AFROHUN Transitional Award, I don't think if they'll accept basic laboratory trials. So in most cases, we'll end up working at a descriptive level using case reports, case series, descriptive surveys, but also at analytical stage, going for control studies, the cohort studies. So that could be the focus. And ladies and gentlemen, since I'm just ending my presentation at the study designs, normally when you design a study like a transitional award wants us to achieve, they normally take us to the basic structures for study designs. We normally consider the population to be studied. And as I said, it has to be a relevant population. Then outcome. Are you talking about disease? So we must be able to define and describe the population of concern very well in the proposal. Then what is the expected, okay? What is the outcome, basically outcome variable, if at all is the disease, or if it's mortalities, if it is a recovery, increased immunity after our intervention, for example. So basic structure for the study designs, consider population, then consider outcome variables per unit time. So the time could be, for example, in a cross-sectional study designs, is snapshot type of study, where in terms of time, just collect the data once. And this is typical what epidemiologists taught us. So I'm very happy that you have Professor Kileo. I believe after the presentation, I'll be able to remind us on what really should be considered in terms of basic structures in our study designs. So if it is a simple study, consider population, outcome of concern, and the time, but you can extend, you can go to level 2. So you had the population, and you had the outcome and the time, and that it was POT. But now, second level, we add an element of factors, a factor element. What are the exposure factors? So the moment you put exposure factors, then you change from POT, you go to PIOT. And this is accepted, and we expect it to read in the series in your proposals. You can move to the third level of basic structures for the study designs. You move from POT, number 1, you add exposure factor, you go to PIOT, and from PIOT, you can move to the third structure. some of you might come up with a study where you consider population, you consider the outcome variables, you consider time. But some of you might say, we wanted to intervene. So if you wanted to intervene, basically you have intervention package, which must be very well described. You want to educate the community. That is the intervention. But how do we know if the community has been educated? Third level of basic structures for study designs takes us to the comparator. So comparator is very important. Comparison. How do you make a comparison? Working in populations, it's very difficult to have, for example, a control group which cannot be contaminated because people would communicate and you have intervention group. However, epidemiologists, study designers, they are saying you can have a comparator, and the comparator could be the data you collect before intervention. So you compare before and after, or you can compare between intervene and non-intervened group. So this is the third level of basic structures of the study designs. And if we want now to go to the details, because this is what is going to, this is what I'm going to conclude, because my presentation today is supposed to go up to the study designs, just the basics. So what I said we expect you in the methodology to write to us that my study, okay, will be conducted in area or site X. Why? There has to be considerations. Remember, I pointed to you about 10 or so factors that you may consider. You should consider the population, consider time, consider the economy, consider the relevance, consider the effectiveness, and so forth. After that, then you go to the study designs. This, they will ask you what is the study design. So we say, ladies and gentlemen, you can go to descriptive study designs or analytical study designs. So this is a conventional way, the way they try to package it so that people can understand. And we said with the descriptive study designs is where you are going to gather qualitative information. For example, you are going to carry out in-depth interviews. You are going to carry out focus group discussions. You are going to carry out ethnographic surveys. So ethnographic surveys, pictorial studies, just use pictures. We end up with we end up with the qualitative information. And with that, we have software for that. For example, I could say in vivo, people are talking about such software, Atlas TRT. They end up giving you an overview, and they will say the main content is like that. They will give you some quotation. It's a very good study, by the way. Initially, you cannot study and plan and say you want numbers. It might be difficult. And it's not bad. And they have tools for that. They will tell you, we want to prepare the interview, not viewing guide. Those are the tools, and it works very well. And a descriptive study, to my understanding, is not about numbers. And basically, you'll never hear about p-values. You'll not hear about R square. You'll never hear about whatever. They'll end up saying, this is what we found as a content. And if you ask about the sample size, because the lecture 2 will be about the sample size as well. These guys, they never even consider sample size. You ask them, what is the sample size? They say until saturation. So they want you to interview people until saturation, until they have got the result they wanted. They stop there. So you should understand, and when you say, I'm going to use descriptive approach, and basically we understand you are going to focus on population and the outcome variable you want to relate with maybe high prevalence of rabies. So rabies case, mortalities, morbidities, fear for people against corona, and so forth. On the other hand, we have analytical. Once you talk about analytical, ladies and gentlemen, here is about numbers. And basically we expect you to come up with a quantitative kind of data. And for example, questionnaire survey. People say questionnaire because you are going to be asking people whether it's closed or is open-ended questionnaire. Normally, you have to calculate the sample size. So it's part of analytical. We are spoiled like hardcore scientists. They will say, talk about questionnaire, and you are saying that is the tool. They consider collecting blood sample and analyzing for protein concentration, analyzing for antibodies and the antigen, establishing the viruses, viral load. They say this is the analytical. Ladies and gentlemen, questionnaire survey is part of analytical because you're going to work with the numbers. 20% where, okay, something like that. So the analytical could be divided. We said you have observation. You are just observing what is happening in the population. You are not going to intervene, and you could have a cross-sectional study. So you just go there, snapshot study, then you just collect information once, and basically here you realize that you are combining the outcome variable and the factors at the same time. For a cross-sectional study, that's what we do. But for cohort study, for example, ladies and gentlemen, is where you have the outcome. You have the disease in question that you want to observe, and you are dividing maybe groups based on presence of the factor or absence of the factor, and you follow up. You will hear more in my second lecture. But eventually you come up and you're trying to associate the outcome variables and the exposure, the factors. And basically you could do it normally, you start with the two groups and you observe them, you divide them, should be representative. We'll discuss and how we make representation out of that. You can have case control where you have disease positive and the disease negative, and you try to follow the factors that might have led to the diseases, presence of the disease or absence of the disease. To save time, you can have interventional study. And this is where I said you have a comparator. You have a population in the question, you have the intervention in the question, you have the outcome variable per time, but you must have a comparator. We said the simple one, for example, you are doing intervention, you can compare before and after intervention. But if you go further and you do at experimental scale, ladies and gentlemen, you can have random allocation. Here, there is no random allocation. You include all. It's the question of time. When did you do it? You did it before you intervened, and you compare the data after you have intervened. But here, you want to take them all. So you have a random allocation, you have randomized controlled trials at an individual level. So you are allocating individuals in representative groups. Random allocation is taken into account. But you can have at a cluster level, for example, where you have cluster randomized controlled trials, you can have step-waged and so forth. So ladies and gentlemen, these are examples of what we expect to see. Typically, I would say what we expect to see when you are writing your proposals. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for paying attention to my presentation. The presentation will be available for you to follow up, but I expect to get input from you guys since you are all ready. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, I say at the planning stage, we start lighter, and as we move deeper, we finally are getting more involved seriously. When we implement our project, we start lighter, and as you move at the conclusion, the arrows get deeper and deeper. And without wasting time, I said, members, our interest basically in the result chain is the outcome level, because the action research speaks about action. These are the 4 elements which we normally consider when we are writing our proposals. Constraint analysis, come up with the objectives. From the objective, we come up with the specific objectives. We translate them, making tasks. From the tasks, we come up with the results. And remember the result chain, we want to see the expected output, expected outcome, and the contribution to the impact. And basically, transitional award. In terms of result chain, the focus is at outcome level, and how to make the outcomes, we'll be discussing it during lecture 2. Thank you very much for listening. I present.
Thanks for presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Mdegela. We have some reactions here. I think the professor deserves applause. Can you give a hand to clap?
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. So we'll
And
now,
Winnie, since Professor Kileo is with us, who taught us,
yes,
being mentoring us, I think it should be part of helping us to putting the matter clearer, because we wanted to help people write good proposals to the expectation of the reviewers. Thank
all
you.
right. So are you suggesting that we give him a few minutes to, in case he wants to add something?
I would be happy to hear from him, because this is typical his area.
Okay. Professor Kileo, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think Winnie, Professor Mdegela has said it all.
Yeah.
Actually, he reminded me a lot of what I've already forgotten. Thank you so much, Professor Mdegela.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to invite Dr. Fatimata Diop Niang to take on the next session, which is question and answer. Over to you, Dr. Fatimata. And then you'll wrap up. Our next session will run on the 17th. That is next week. Please attend. Remember to sign up in the attendance sheet so that we can easily reach you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Fatimata.
Okay, good afternoon. You hear me?
Good afternoon.
Yes. Thank you.
Oui. Okay, good afternoon. Congratulations to Professor Ndegela pour. Je pense que je peux parler français.
So I think let me start speaking French because there's interpretation. So can I speak in French, ladies and gentlemen?
Please, Winnie.
Yes, do so. There's translation.
Okay. Over, Dr. Fatimata.
Oui, d'accord, merci. Oui.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hi to everyone. And congrats to Professor Ndegela for this wonderful presentation, and it's a very rich presentation in learning, and I think it is going to help a lot in the research studies as people write their papers. We have reached that series of question and answer session. If you have questions, suggestions, comments, you have the floor. So if you'd like to ask the question, this is the time. You ask for permission and then go ahead and speak.
Allô, est-ce que vous me recevez?
Have you heard what I've just said, ladies and gentlemen?
D'accord. Ok, s'il y avait des commentaires.
So if there are comments, questions, suggestions, so in light this presentation, please go ahead and ask your questions, make your comments or suggestions.
Any comments? Any questions?
Yatide.
C'est très, très clair.
Was it very clear?
Hello.
Some questions in the chat.
Yeah.
There is my friend who want to ask a
Ah,
question.
okay.
I wanted to know
Okay.
if the
Right,
document will be
Okay.
available. Yes. Okay, if the document will be available for us after the training.
Positive knowledge we have. So we should guide us on how people can access the materials, but certainly the material will be available for you. Winnie, if you have a complement to that.
Yes, we shall share the material. We have, I saw Ken responded and she said, we have, we'll share the videos in our YouTube. We have a website. We also encourage everyone to register in the attendance sheet so that we can have access to your email addresses, and then we can link as well. So there are various ways that we can share these materials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Oui. Merci.
Yes. Thank you very much, Winnie. Thank you. So there was another question concerning the duration of the application of this training. Is it 1 year? How long will this applications will last? Those people who are asking for transition awards, how long will it last? 1 year, 2 years? Hello. Have you had the question?
Yes, we've
There
heard
is
the
a question.
So there's a question. Okay.
Concerning the duration of the project.
Right.
For 1 year or 2 years.
We have this transition award is a USAID funded project, and the project is running for 2 years. So the first round is this one that we have run, and we expect that the country managers in your respective countries have shared the call for proposals. So we expect you to have submitted your proposals by 8th June, and thereafter we shall select. So officially we are supposed to end our first year of the project in September, but we'll allow it to run for another 3 months. So for the first round, we hope that it will end by December. So when you are crafting your proposal, please know that it is not, I mean, the duration is very limited, around 6 to 9 months. So take that into consideration. So we will run the other round of awards in October again, and we expect that you will participate in those as well. So target 6 months to be on the safe side. Over.
Merci, Professor.
Thank you for your reaction, Professor, concerning this assistance.
Sorry, Fatimata, I did not get you.
No, I was just asking if there is any other question or comment from the assistants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Wait, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, so for those who haven't received the call, please register. Ensure that you have registered in the attendance sheet, and we will repost the call by email. We'll post it on our website, so you'll have access to the call. Thank you.
Please, can you say in French, please?
James Yushan, there is a hand raising from James.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you very much for the presentation. This is James from Makerere University, Uganda. My question is, how many awardees or how many projects are you planning to fund or to support on this call at hand? Thank you.
Should I answer that, Dr. Fatimata?
Yes, Dr. Winnie, go ahead, please.
So we have 5 awards. Initially, 4 of them are country awards, and 1 is a cross-country award. So initially, we only have 5 awards, and that's what we are going to attend to immediately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Winnie, for this clarification.
Merci, Winnie, pour cette, Dr. Winnie, pour, so thank you, Dr. Winnie, for, okay. Help in partner identification. So there's a question from Gabriel.
There is a question from if the secretariat can help identifying partners. Yes. Winnie, maybe you can answer to these questions.
Okay, Gabriel, kindly explain what you mean by your question.
I mean that is sometimes like I want a partner in, say, for example, DRC to be on our team. Can we contact you to describe the personality that we can work with?
That is a very tricky one, Gabriel, but we actually have an assumption that since AFROHUN is a network, you have most likely interacted with other colleagues in other countries and universities. And the best we can do is to share a database, but that would really delay the process. I think you can work with your country managers to help you do that. Gabriel, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Win.
Thank you.
There is another question from Abraham asking that shall we
I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. Can you
I think
hear
I was the
anything?
one with the
Winnie?
problem.
No, I think she has a problem, maybe network or something.
Okay. So someone in the chat is asking, who are our country managers? Okay, so I think that means that this person is not from one of the AFROHUN member institutions. So how do we help this one?
Yeah, aussi une question.
Which country?
Also another question.
Coming from?
The good thing you said you will send the call. The call has some of the details in.
Details.
So you will
Yes.
contact you personally. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, so we'll send the additional information about the AFROHUN offices and the office holders.
That's beautiful.
Okay. Any other questions, or we end our session here?
Oui.
There is another one. There is another one. There's another question concerning the methodology. Is it Aristide who would like to know? Is there a preference in terms of methodologies that should be selected for the to put in place this action-based research
Are we going to be
to attain impact?
considering
So are there some favored
demonstrating
methodologies?
the impact? Are we going to demonstrate the impact?
It's not from Aristide. Yes. You forward it. Yes. Okay.
Yes, Aristide just forwarded the question from the chat, asking whether we're going to go up to the time of demonstrating impact.
From Shalto Ujima University.
That was asked by somebody from Dima University.
Shall I brief my question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Hello?
yes.
Actually, it was me who raised the question. Shall I brief the question?
Oui. Yes.
Yes, go on, Shalto. Ask your
Okay.
question.
Thank you, everyone. What Prof have been presenting different alternative methodologies that we could use in choosing or in the write-up of the proposal, the PICOs, the PIOT, and the others. So, is there any recommended methods that you are putting for this specific action research or for this specific grant, or we could go to any of them as long as we are going to show that not just about telling the problem, rather what we will be making or we are bringing the difference and so on. That was my question.
Okay, thank you very much. I know I presented it
I
last.
think, sorry, Prof is not audible to me.
Oh,
I couldn't
sorry.
hear his sound.
Oh, sorry. Hello, can you hear from me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oui.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you. Can hear you.
So ideally, I said when it comes to the planning stage, it will include the section for Some would say materials and the methods, but the others will say methodology. For now, it doesn't matter, but basically the plan on how you collect the data. And the study sites has some considerations. We expect that most of you will work under field condition. So the second part, after you have written about the study site and provided the justification, we'll have some examples during series 2, because we will have some cases to give you an example on what you expect. Another consideration is on the study designs. And we said the way study designs have been packaged to help us understand, they normally, in most of the books I read, they say we have 2 types of study designs. You have descriptive study designs and you have analytical study designs. And the descriptive study designs is where you have qualitative kind of data. I gave you an example, like data you collect through key informants interviews, maybe through focused group discussions, through descriptive ethnographic surveys, and so forth. And basically, it's not about numbers. And we have some software. I will present them next time. Now, the second part we said is analytical, and is basically the one which gives us the quantitative data. I will expound it during the next session. So far now, if you go to analytical, as I said, you have observational in the first part, but another part is experimental. And experimental, you manipulate and observe after you have manipulated. So you have vaccinated your population and you want to observe what comes after you have intervened, after you have vaccinated. You have trained people and you think the knowledge you have given them. So basically you have made some intervention. It comes to be part of the experimental, part of design and analytical study designs. Observation, we said you observe what is happening without manipulating. Now, whether descriptive or analytical, in my view, both of them are good study designs because it depends on the type of the data you want to gather. There are some cost implication, but sensitiveness of the data you are going to get. And nowadays, I could see people using mixed study designs. They will combine descriptive and analytical. And it's not all of them. So under descriptive, you can just use one study under descriptive. Under analytical, you could do the same thing. So here is an example where you have the basic structures, and I said whether you are doing descriptive or you are doing analytical, what you consider is the population of concern. And the population, we are buying it from human. We are animals in plant, they call plant population and so forth. But basically, the target population that you are observing, okay, that you are observing. So if you are dealing with the rabies, you would be thinking about the dog population. You'll be talking about human population, the study target population, that is referred to P. So you must define it. For example, if you are working on we said on COVID-19, it depends on what you want to answer. Or you are working on rabies, and specifically your study is gender-based, and the study focuses maybe on children alone, school children. So we will ask you later on what is the inclusion and exclusion criteria for the population of concern. It means if you are talking about school children, T is about the school children population. Then you will have, we'll train later on how to come up with a sample because normally you define the population, describe it, then after that you say, these are my inclusion and exclusion criteria. And after that you say, okay, this is my sampling frame. Then you collect a representative population, a sample, which will be lecture 2, for you to observe whatever you are interested at. So if it is mortalities or death, that is an outcome variable. If it is a disease, maybe raise in antibodies, maybe loss of antibodies, change in behavior. What you are observing to associate with the study question, that is what is about all. And the time, for how long, and do you collect once? Because sometimes we say snapshot, we collect once, but you find your studies for 6 months. It means you go to a certain group, you collect the data once, you never go and collect samples in the same sample or individuals again. So this is what we call the POT, population of concern, what you are looking at, the outcome variables for what you are looking at, and the time. So number 2, we said number 1 does not consider, for example, the factors. For you, you are interested. If I'm working on rabies, and my interest is to see change in behavior. Just go in a study area, you have maybe 20 households to collect the data. You go there, if at all you want to see rabid animal, you just come up with the data that you saw the animal which was rabid, full stop. But you don't, under POT, you don't assess the factors associated to that. If you start considering the factors associated to rabies that you saw, then you go to the advanced level of the basic structure, and we normally say you include the factors, exposure factors. So in addition to population of concern, you consider what you are observing is rabies, rabid animal, then per unit time just once, and eventually what are the factors? Could it be no vaccination, or distance from the veterinarian, or absence of veterinarian? So this is another consideration, and you can do the first one, or you can take the second one if at all you are considering both. In the third one, we are saying if you are doing intervention, you are doing intervention in the population, and you have outcome variable, maybe the disease, per time, and what kind of intervention, education intervention, community intervention, education intervention, or vaccination, or treatment, or anything. But then if you want to see if it has worked or not, there must be a comparison, what we call a comparator, and you must define the comparator very well. So finally, I came up with this framework. I said the descriptive one, where we have qualitative data. I said normally we use the POT. We have the population of concern, and we have the outcome variables per unit time. But we said for analytical, you can observational studies. Basically, you are observing what is happening in the population without intervention. And basically, you consider population, outcome, time, and the exposure factors. And you can carry out cross-sectional studies. Under cross-sectional studies, sometimes we just observe the POT, but sometimes under cross-sectional studies, we also observe the exposure factors to be able to describe your results later on. But you can have cohort studies, and you can have case control studies. And basically, what I meant with cohort of studies, normally you start by having the disease of concern, and you have basically the cohort of exposed individual to the factor you consider could be responsible, and having non-exposed group to the factor of concern. Then you observe if at all these two will end up having the disease. And basically, you are speculating and observing in the population. What we normally compare later on is the relativity, relativity on what you have observed between exposed and non-exposed group. And what happens again, you can have now the case control studies. Case control studies, you start with the disease and the non-diseased, and then you observe what might have been the factors, okay, prior to getting the disease. So All these, you find them under observational analytical studies, specifically the cohort and the case control studies. If at all you are having vaccination, for example, or training, you can have comparison. So you assess what you found before and after intervention, or you have a control group and a treatment group, and you randomized, you have randomized controlled trials, or at individual level or cluster level. So basically, we are not saying one is superior than the other. It depends on the research question and other factors that would make you decide what to do. We will discuss it in detail in lecture 2, because we will have living examples taking us to sampling and going back again to considerations of where we should consider POT being relevant, PIOT being relevant, or PCOT being relevant. So sorry for answering it in a long way, but I think it's worth you understanding the way I've tried to explain. Thank you very much.
Ouais, merci beaucoup, professeur.
Thank you, Professor. This is very clear to us. Those explanations are very detailed, and so the choice depends on a number of factors, as you have just said. So there's another question that is has come back to us, Dr. Winnie. So, Dr. Winnie, can a single country present different projects?
Allô?
Allô?
Oui, est-ce que Winnie, vous avez reçu ma question? Il y a une question.
Have you understood the question? So there's a question from the participants. Can a country, one country, put in more than one can a country put in more than one project and make that request for more than one project?
Yes, more than one project, because it's a competitive grant. So we expect different teams to come up with proposals and compete for the awards that are being offered. I hope I got the question right.
Oui, vous avez bien répondu.
Yes, it's very clear. It's very clear. So, so it's competitive and it's open. So you can, even from one country, present a number of projects. Thank you very much for that answer, Winnie. I don't see any further questions, so I don't know whether there are other questions. Maybe I can give you the floor before we close. Are there any other people who would like to ask any question before we close?
Donc, étant donné qu'il n'y a plus de questions,
given that the questions are done, so Dr. Winnie or Professor Ndegela, can I give you the floor? You want to add something, Professor Ndegela? Sorry, excuse me. Can I speak? Yeah, go on. Yes.
Je ne sais pas parce que j'ai essayé de cliquer sur les liens, je n'arrive pas.
Tried to join the WhatsApp group, but I can't join the WhatsApp group. So can you please tell me? Can you tell me how to join the WhatsApp group, please?
I think this is a private arrangement. It's not initiated by AFROHUN, so I don't understand what this WhatsApp group is all about. So for AFROHUN, as long as it's not from AFROHUN IT, then we cannot answer that, Felicity. Okay, so Professor Mdegela, do you have any comment that you'd like to make before we say bye to these people?
Thank you very much. Mine is appreciation
Yes.
to members that devoted their time to listen to my presentation. And I appreciate for their participation, because they might have decided not to come. So I could be presenting for my own, teaching myself. And that is not a good class. So really, I thank all members who participated. And number two, I really appreciate for the compliment they have given to me. I'm happy if at all some of you feel like it was worth it. And the secretariat at AFROHUN, I think you remember, there were some discussions whether it was relevant to have this kind of revision, because all of us are scientists, but we thought some of you might require this knowledge, because what will be assessed in the grants is what I'm trying to expand during my presentations. So I'm happy, because the purpose of this was to give you some overview on what is expected in the proposal, but also to give you orientation. So for those that feel like this is not a worthy material, imagine we are presenting foundational skills. It's not advanced. These are foundational skills for every researcher in AFROHUN. For every researcher expecting to apply for transitional award, then he should have these foundational knowledge in these such foundational skills. So mine is compliment, is appreciation for the compliment, but also really appreciating for the time they have devoted to listen to my presentation. Lastly, I'm very happy for the question. The more you ask, it makes me sharpen my level of thinking, the scale of thinking, and so forth. So thank you very much. And I believe you'll turn back again to the session next week, where we'll go to the level 2, session number 2, of advancing from where we ended today. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, Prof. We appreciate your input. We are delighted to have you as usual. And for the rest of the participants, we greatly appreciate your turn up, and we look forward to hosting you a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Yes.